Today I'm here with Justin Holler. Thanks for coming back again. And we are going to talk about everything you need to know about buying vacant land. So Justin, let's do this. Let's assume that I don't know anything about it and I'm interested in purchasing some land that eventually, whether it be with you or someone else, that I'm going to build a house there. Let's start with some of the things that I should probably look at first.
Absolutely. I think it's a fantastic question and a great way to look at it. I think when you're talking about purchasing land, you want to have an idea of at least what kind of a home you're going to put on that land.
Okay.
I typically run into two types of customers or potential buyers. One is that they have a specific floor plan idea in mind, setup, style of home they want, or they have a specific location in mind. We have some homes that are 80 or 90 feet wide and have a side load garage, and so you need 120 feet of buildable space to be able to put that on a piece of property. If you find a lot you love and that lot's 120 feet wide, you may not be able to put that particular floor plan on that lot.
Okay.
Vice versa, if you aren't specifically, I can do a 1-story or 2-story, I just know that I want to live in Lakeway, or I know, like on a smaller lot, then I say go out and start searching for the land first before you have the floor plan. So it really does depend on what your specific desires are going to be. Is it the location or is it the type of home there?
Okay.
So based on your analogy, if we go with the, you know that you want one of those estate style, 4,000 square foot, 1-story home with a side load garage. So then what you want to start looking for then is land that can kind of fit that type of home on it.
Okay.
We see lots more you're moving closer to the city area, they get a little narrower, they get a little deeper. Lots that get out in the more rural area, you'll find are a little bit wider and also deeper because they're just actually a bigger piece of land. So I think first things first is deciding what's most important to you. And when you find that you want that larger estate home, you're gonna have to look a little further out probably. It's gonna be hard to find that piece of land that you're gonna want for that home in the city. Unless you're buying a bigger lot. I think secondly, you want to look at budget. I think budget's always a big constraint. So somebody may say I got say $1 million to spend, just to put a round number out there. And so what does that look like? Well, if I want a 4,000 square foot home and I want to do all this stuff to it, maybe that home's going to end up costing me $650,000, $700,000. Now you know that you have $300,000 left for land.
Just the land.
Yeah. So you're kind of backing into that price point in your budget. But I think having a good all-in budget and then understanding, okay, I want to spend, I'm willing to spend up to this amount of money for the land so I can save this much for the home. And it circles back to that. What's more important to me, the house or the home or the location.
Right.
An acre lot in Marble Falls or $100,000 range. You go to Lakeway for that same, you're like $400,000, $500,000.
Right. Just for the land. Right.
Just for the lot. Yeah. There's like Crystal Falls has some half-acre lots for $300,000. So it really does depend on that. Once you find this particular piece of property and you think this is going to be where I want to build my home, you really want to make sure that you have at least electric and water available.
Okay.
If you don't have either one of those, you're going to elevate the total cost of the project because you have to bring the electric in, you may have to get a well. So I always tell people, electric and water are the two main points you want to find.
Which would certainly make sense, but of course, as you move out further into the rural areas, probably less likelihood of having that availability of the electric and water.
Correct. I think electric's going to be pretty much in most places. I notice in the Lago Vista area, you can have some challenges there with the electric, whereas in, maybe electric's been brought to this one home, but you're buying a lot 8 lots down,
right,
and you have to bring the electric there. That's going to be on you. A lot of these bigger communities, these 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 acre plats, they generally will have the electric already there. Water is going to be hit and miss. There is a kind of a subdivision or development out in Bertram called Whitewater Springs that has a community well, and you pay them for the water tap into that community. There's a newer community that is Legacy Hills out on the other side of Henley, west of Dripping Springs, where you have to have a well.
And just to be clear, when you're talking water, that does not, sewer is separate from that, correct?
Correct. I'm talking about your drinking water.
Right, because sewer would be another concern, because if you can't tie into the city sewer, you're going to have to do a septic
System. Concern, I think, would be not as accurate, because I would say about 95% of what I do requires a septic system.
A septic, because you're
And
further
it's
out.
kind of just
I got you.
that deal, which actually is kind of nice. Right now, Dripping Springs has a moratorium on new build permits because of wastewater problems. One of the variances to get around that temporary moratorium on permits is if your new build is not going to impact the wastewater system. Well, if you have your own septic tank, you're not impacting the wastewater system. So in theory, that would work as a variance to continue that path.
But clearly, these are all things that someone should probably put into the planning stage, because they could easily be surprised if you just go out and buy the land and, now we got to run electric.
What we do at David Weekley is, the builder lot consultant, we'll actually, before you go under contract, before you go under a purchase agreement or a pre-construction agreement or anything of that nature, if you have a piece of land that you want, you can reach out to us, and we're more than happy to go out and take a look at that property for you and give you a builder analysis of it.
I got you. Which is actually something I was thinking about. Now, if it's all flat, it's one thing. But when you move, especially like in that Lakeway area, there are a lot of examples of the rock and the different kind of terrain, which would, I'm sure, would impact the ability to build on this specific lot.
It could impact the ability to build, but really what it impacts again is that bottom dollar, that budget. So, if you have a lot that has this massive topography to it, a lot of slope or a bunch of hills in it, for David Weekley, we offer a 3-foot average foundation. So we're going to take the 4 corners of that home and we're going to pinpoint that where it would lay on this piece of property. And then we're going to take a zip level and we're going to shoot the 4 corners of that to get an average 4 corners. As long as that 4-corner average is around that 36-inch mark, the slab, the foundation, and there's not any sort of crazy underlying soil issues, like you're talking about maybe the soil's super soft, we don't have to reinforce the foundation. Just a standard foundation is going to be included in that base price.
I got you.
Now, if you have this drastic fall, and on one side you have an 18-inch foundation, but on the back side it's 10 feet. Well, now your average foundation height is going to be above that 36 inches, so there would be some additional cost for that larger foundation.
Absolutely, okay. And of course, you actually brought up a good one with the soil, because there's huge differences, let's say, if you're building in East Austin versus building in the Hill Country.
Absolutely. And so for every property that we're going to build on, every lot you find, once we're in the pre-construction phase of our process, we are going to do a soils analysis. We're going to do it's a 6-inch wide, 15-foot borehole around where the center of the foundation is going to be, and they're analyzing all the soil composition. Really, what they're looking for is kind of a moisture data and bedrock, and wanting to see, how impacted is that soil by moisture and rain. The higher the impact, the greater the chances for that foundation to shift and move and crack and have issues. So we want to really understand, we have a full depth of understanding of what that soil and rock composition is, so we can engineer your foundation accordingly.
Okay. And of course, actually just one thing that came to my mind, just what we've talked about so far: electric, water, soil, topography. In a market like we're in, where things tend to move fast, maybe not quite as fast on big pieces of land, what kind of a time frame would you estimate if someone wants to do it right and get these things answered before they actually make an offer? Is that something that could be done in, say, like an option period time frame, or?
In theory, you could. So we don't have, if somebody doesn't have a piece of property, but they want to engage David Weekley to build their home for them, and they're going to put an offer in the property, we can do the soils analysis prior to them closing on the property. But they would have to, generally have to have an offer put in and go into pre-construction, because we need to have an address site for us to really start working our process. What I can say is that in the surrounding Austin areas, you have very little issues with soil. You go down to like San Marcos, you have some softer soil there, and you can have some issues there. So and the other thing is, if you're seeing homes around there, I mean, the chances are it's going to be pretty.
That's a valid point. Yeah.
A lot of times the soils analysis is definitely a needed, required, and warranted part of the process. But it also is one that is in some ways is going to happen no matter what, and the results don't vary that often.
Okay.
This year, I have had one foundation that required some extra. We do a post-tension cable foundation, which means it's kind of like the standardized foundation for around here. We dig beams into the earth and canals that we pour the concrete, make cement beams, and we have these cables that run horizontally and perpendicular across the foundation. And once the foundation dries, the cords are actually stretched out and then cut off, and it creates a real firm, a real sturdy foundation.
Okay, gotcha.
So I have had one where we had to do some extra cabling to create some more firmer foundation just for shifting and things like that. But it was nothing issue, and the buyer didn't notice any change on there. It was just more of an engineering side.
I gotcha. And of course, I guess that's kind of where my thought was going, is that once the land is purchased and you build, the foundation, like you talked about, one side at 18 inches, the other side at 10 feet, that's going to be a huge additional cost.
Absolutely.
Whereas if there were issues with the soil, from what I'm hearing you say, is generally speaking, and not to hold you to it, but generally speaking, it's not going to look at like exorbitant, right?
No.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I had a customer that I was working with up in the Harker Heights clean area.
Okay. Yeah.
And while we were walking the land, one of the neighbors came out and was talking to us, and she's like, "Well, you're going to have your what you call them, your like these posts done, basically where they have to dig deep into the earth and pour a concrete beam that is 20 or 30 feet deep into the ground, because where this neighborhood was actually." It was spoils or dirt from an excavation they made with this man-made mountain, so it wasn't as firm. So in order to stop the foundation from shifting down, they had to go in and do these deep beams in there. So, like pillars almost. I mean, they said they did 36 of them underneath their home. And it cost them like $80,000 to do. So, my friend of mine actually built down in Austin and had to have some of those for his home as well. And so. It can happen, but I think that, more often than not, it doesn't happen. And really, it works for someone like yourself and with your buyers to do as much due diligence on the front end as possible.
Right.
I've found that a lot of people that are selling land, they're like, well, it's your responsibility to do all the due diligence. Okay, well, I don't mind doing it, but why? Why can't you tell me what's up? What are we afraid of uncovering, so...
Well, in defense of that is that I've seen a lot of properties, particularly out there in that Lago Vista area, that may have been purchased 2 or 3 generations back, and no one did anything to it, and it's like they may not know.
Gotcha.
But again, there's different scenarios, but that's a valid point. Someone that has owned the land should at least be able to provide some kind of information.
Absolutely.
I mean, similar like a seller's disclosure when you're selling a house. I mean, I at least know this,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Probably a good rule of thumb, and you'd probably recommend that, is to always budget a certain percentage for unknown.
Like a 10% budget in there for ancillary costs. And again, when looking at the property, I have a zip level, so I'm actually able to shoot if we wanted to, a rough idea of it, and can provide some generalized estimates of what's going to happen. And I usually go on the higher side.
Okay.
Like, this foundation is probably going to be, $50,000 extra or whatever, and then it comes in at 35. Well, that's a nice.
That's a nice surprise.
You're fine, and then you owe me $35,000.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a problem. So, but no, that's part of that whole why we come out there, why we go through this, because I think it helps to understand. You most likely won't have any foundation costs, or you'll have a lot of foundation costs.
Gotcha.
Because there are some homes that are just built like on the side of a cliff.
Yeah.
The foundations are huge.
Yeah.
Rough Hollow is a great example.
I was thinking about that area, right? Yeah, or especially the other side of the river from Steiner Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of rock over there.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, so let's kind of like summarize what we've talked about so far. So thinking about buying land, probably a good idea to engage you before rather than after.
Yes.
And we want to identify the water, the electric. We want to, you said the soil is not mandatory before placing the offer, but we need to do that before getting an accurate estimate on the foundation.
That's one of the first things I do. When we go into our pre-construction phase, which is kind of the first phase of our agreement to work with the buyer, they've selected a floor plan, they've selected the changes they want to make to that floor plan, their flex options or whatever. We're, on our end, we're going to engage a soils analysis.
Okay.
It's one of the first things that happens. So while your plan is actually being sent to our architectural team, and my meeting with our architectural team is taking place, my office team has ordered soils report, and
Gotcha.
then the soils guys are going out there to do it. So this is all kind of happening simultaneously.
Okay.
And so before you go to actually signing a purchase agreement, we're going to have that soils analysis back.
Gotcha.
So we're going to understand. So yeah, you may have, we may discover something in there, but you're not locked into building this home, or because it could happen that we find out that you're going to have probably $50,000 or $60,000 in elevated foundation cost. At that moment, you can say, well, maybe I need to I love the land, but maybe I can't build this 4,000 square foot home. Maybe I'll build a 2,800 square foot
I got you.
home.
I got you.
And,
So you would have options to kind of keep the budget.
Net on the deal, if it comes down to finances, of course, which most of it does, you have the ability to kind of pivot at that point.
I got you. Okay. So what else besides, again, what we've talked about, the soil, we've talked about the foundation. What other concerns should someone be aware of?
I think understanding the ACC covenants, the Architectural Control Committee of a certain area.
That's it. Yeah, very good.
We had a year or so past, which was before I came on to David Weekley. We had moments before it seemed like my son's baseball coaches actually had engaged David Weekley and were working with one of my counterparts on building 2 homes in this neighborhood. They picked their floor plans. They were very excited to go. And then when they got to this certain point of reviewing the ACC covenants, there was a line item in there saying, well, they went through builders, and they had 7 custom builders you could use and 15 architects you could use. And so they hadn't realized it.
Wow.
We couldn't build in this area. So there's actually communities out there that don't want a David Weekley type builder in there. They want to keep it really custom.
I got you.
And so they ended up having to pay like almost $300,000 more each for their homes that they wanted because they went with a custom
because
builder.
They had to use this.
And at that point, they already closed on the land. They're already there. So if you run into, and I've had several people I've talked to that we've gotten to the conversation. I said, well, are you sure David Weekley is allowed to build in there? And they say, oh yeah, I'm sure they are. And then the conversation come back, like, oh well, no, for some reason.
Guess what? Yeah.
It's not that we're bad. It's not that there's anything wrong with our product. It's just that these certain communities have certain, I don't know if it's good old boy. I don't know what it is, but they just don't want a production builder in there. They want a strictly custom builder. So, and that's fine. But I think understanding that, because what David Weekley can do for $700,000 home is not, you aren't going to get that from a custom guy.
Right, exactly. Right.
$300,000 or $400,000 more. So I think it goes back to understanding what exactly it is that you as a buyer wants.
Gotcha.
And if you're like, I love a David Weekley type builder, and I want to get you, I want you to build my home because I trust the reputation, the 45 years in the industry, the warranty program, everything that you guys offer, I want that. When I can't do it on this piece of land, well, let's keep finding you a piece of land.
Gotcha. Find one you could.
And I've got several buyers out there right now that I'm still working with, and I'm working with agents talking about land and looking for them, driving all over town looking at
exactly.
That's great.
Gotcha. Well, now that's certainly something that you should be able to identify before making the purchase.
Absolutely.
I don't know the circumstances they didn't figure out till later, but if you ask the right questions at least, you should be able to find that. Yeah.
I want to know what the deed restrictions are. I want to know what the ACC covenants are. Because some deed restrictions are no front load garages. You have to have a side load garage. A 50% masonry. Well, what does that mean? 50% masonry. Does stucco count? So there's a lot of different things that are out there. Some communities are you must have a metal or Spanish tile roof.
Oh, yeah, exactly
now,
right.
Those are $40,000 to $60,000 on addition to base price.
Wow.
They're really pricey. So those are a lot of things to take in. So and those are things you can also see if you're buying a lot in an established community.
That you already see
as you drive around. If you see everybody has a metal roof, it's a pretty good indication that metal roofs are a requirement of that community.
Exactly.
Or Spanish tile or whatever it is.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's actually a good point. So we've checked that. What else? Is there anything else that we need to be thinking about or concerned with before we buy that land?
I think looking to, and I'm always one from a budgetary standpoint too, is, where's the house going to be on the property? Where are we going to place this home at? Because if you find this great piece of land and it's got this nice, flat spot to build on, but it's 400 feet off the road, just understand there's driveway costs. There's, dragging. We offer 100 feet of underground electric and water. Anything over that's going to be an additional charge. So if it goes to 300 feet, 400 feet, you've got 300 feet of additional charge there. It's just stuff to make sure that you're aware of going into this because it can start to add up there.
Gotcha.
And so I always, talk to people too about, understanding that of the topography, understanding like, as they have the foundation, of course, that we talked about. But, I know people that love that topography. They want that hillside home.
Exactly, right,
so,
right.
they're willing to pay for it.
I got you. I got you. Now, what about things like, I mean, when you talk about the architectural and the deed restrictions, should one be concerned about like zoning or anything like that at this point? I know that eventually comes up when you're building the house.
That's a great point. You're going to find that a lot of places, and again, it kind of yes and no. It goes to a personal preference. I think that if there's an ACC board in place, if there, or an HOA, there's going to be, covenants in place. Do you want to buy a piece of land that your next door neighbor can put a double wide up and have an engine hanging from a tree and you're building $1 million home? That's one thing about it. Sometimes it can be too restrictive. It says like it requires you to build 100 feet off the property line. Well, what if at 90 feet back your property drops off a cliff? You have all this flat space up here, but that last 10 feet is going to cause an enormous foundation expense. Can we get around that? Can we get a variance and move our home 25 feet forward so we don't have this massive foundation? So I have had one where we started the process and realized that the property was zoned for a mobile home.
Really?
Yes, and it's going to be rezoned for single family, but it's not there yet, and so they're working through that process. So it's a non-starter for us.
You can't start until it's been rezoned. I got you.
Commercial or multifamily.
Okay.
But generally speaking, that should be something that is notated in the seller's agreement.
Right. Again, in hindsight, everybody should realize that they could get that info before placing an offer, and you don't want to. The ideal scenario is to not be in a position where you're finding that out after the fact.
Correct.
Because like you said, I mean, it could be anything from more money to not even being able to build at all if you got to wait for the rezoning. This would give us kind of a game plan or the kind of like a checklist, if you will, of things that we probably should look at before purchasing the land. And of course, I understand once that's done, then we would move on if we're using you into the pre-construction phase.
Well, one thing I think that I'd like to touch on is the financing piece of it.
Okay.
Because with what's nice about David Weekley is that we do work with a third-party mortgage company that does all of our home loans, all of our construction loans for us. He can actually facilitate the financing purchase of that land.
Of the land.
And then when we start the construction process, the construction loan would actually pay off that land. So it would go from a P&I loan to an interest-only loan. So if you have that $200,000 piece of land, he would do a standard raw land purchase, which I believe is he can fund up to 90% of the appraised value of the property. And once that once you start your construction loan, that loan just gets paid off.
Gotcha.
It gets essentially rolled into that construction.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's actually a good point because the money piece of it, especially if you're talking about like a year, from let's say when you acquire the land or more, to actually move in. Because I think you talked about that in our previous video, how the construction loan, even though it might be a big number, it doesn't fully fund until closing. Right. Yeah.
And a lot of times people are, there's people out there that have the money. Should I pay cash for the land or should I finance the land? And I think that's great to get the financing talk up front. And,
right.
I'm more than happy to connect with my lender. He's very Daryl Crawford's name, and he's extremely responsive and more than happy to reach out and talk with someone very early in the process, way before an offer's made or anything like that, so they can understand what's going to happen. So I think that just doing as much research as humanly possible is out there. And, I think, again, it goes back to just understanding exactly what you're wanting.
Gotcha, absolutely.
What's the most important thing to you? And sitting down and really discussing that with, whoever you're going to be entering in this venture again. Because if you're on different wavelengths there, you're going to find a struggle. So
I got you.
Understanding that, it has to be in this zip code or has to be in this school district. Well, that's great. Well, now let's find out, how we work within that, your desires, your budgets, your needs, and all that.
Okay, perfect. I mean, that's a lot of information. It's almost like you're the Google of home buildings. I'm glad that I consider you my friend, an information source. But no, I appreciate you kind of sharing this. And anybody who might be thinking about it, I mean, it's certainly going to be, I would recommend that you rely on the experience of someone like, David Weekley or myself even to help to find the land, because there's a lot of, or potentially a lot of surprises. that could wind up costing you more. I mean, actually, one thing that came off the top of my head, this may be a question for Daryl, but what if someone already owns the land, or in an effort to kind of make a more competitive offer to purchase the land, is able to pay for it cash? Is it possible to do any kind of a refinance after the fact with that construction loan?
Well, what would happen is that it would almost be your equity into the deal,
right?
Because Daryl's able to loan either 10 or 20% loan to value. So if you already have $100,000 piece of land free and clear, that's going to be
I got you.
So you already have that the table. Now, if liquidity is an issue and you pay $100,000 up front, and that's almost all of your capital, then I would say, well, maybe that's not the best idea. But if you have the ability to do that, Daryl's always going to say, hey, it's great to do that. It's your cash in the bank. It's an asset. You're there. He's very big proponent of that. If the situation for you, if it's comfortable for you to do that.
I understand.
But it literally goes a bunch of different ways. I mean, I have several buyers right now, all of which have some have done 50% down, some have done just 10% down, just because they want to keep their capital and investments until they're ready to fund the 20% down for the construction. So if they don't have it, they're just like, well, I'm just going to. I mean, my net on this deal, if I keep it in my investments, is better than me taking out and paying cash for the land.
Absolutely, so. Makes sense. Okay. Well, like I said, I think that's been very thorough. I mean, it covered a lot of ground, and certainly I think would give someone a checklist of things to look at or at least be aware of or ask the right questions.
Absolutely. But I'd say if somebody is interested in it, they want to reach out to you, reach out to me as well, or if they want, they can go online to davidweekley.com and there a lot. And there's actually a drop-down box there that says, hey, if you're interested in land, fill out some information here. We'll have someone get in contact with you to set up an appointment to do a land consultation.
Perfect. All right. Well, listen, thank you again for coming by, sharing your knowledge, and I look forward to maybe doing this again then and soon.
Thanks for having me.
All right then.